What's going on, people? It's your man, Abrew Yashar'el in the studio today, man. We got another one. We got a banger. This right here, we're talking about the minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is still at $7.25. That's a crying shame. Let me say, my first job that I had as a teenager, I made $4.25 an hour. And that was, what, over 30 years ago. And you tell me the federal minimum wage has only went up $3 since then? $3 over 30 years? Man, if this corporate greed has to stop. Let me say that. I understand corporations have to make their profit. I understand that. And because corporations create jobs so people can pay their bills and take care of their family. So I understand all that. But my kids, as teenagers, could not even make it off $7.25. They couldn't. But paying their cell phones and car notes, and they couldn't make that. That's below the poverty level. And you got a lot of people out here, especially my politicians, would not change it. And so a lot of companies in states are creating that minimum wage boundary. But if you look it up, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25. Even in the state I am in, it's still $7.25. Georgia is $7.25. So, but let's see what Bernie Sanders talking about. Let's get into it. Then I come back.
So you don't think we should change the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour?
No, sir.
Okay. Right now in America, we have over 22 million workers who are making less than $15 an hour, and nearly 40 million people in our country earning less than $17 an hour. Shamefully, the federal minimum wage, despite the efforts of myself and other people here, have not been raised since 2009 and remains an unbelievable $7.25 an hour. Will you work with those of us who want to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage to take millions of Americans out of poverty?
Senator, I believe that the minimum wage is more of a
I know the thing popped up and said that was Trump secretary or something. I could care less. But, and I'm not one of those Trump bashers about like I wasn't a Biden basher. People voted me in the president. That's who they are. I agree with Bernie. Bernie said, let's change the minimum wage from $7.25 to a living wage. It should be a living wage. $7.25 an hour times 40 hours a week is only $290. $290. If you take out taxes, they probably ain't even taking out taxes on you on that because you're below the poverty level. But if you do that times a year, you do $7.25 times 2,080, which is the amount of 40 hours per week for the year, it comes to be like $15,080. You know, $15,080 is nothing. When I look at my bills alone, me and my wife do our budget and see our bills alone, we won't be able to live our lifestyle that long on $15,080. So I think a lot of people out here are greedy. A lot of people out here don't want to see people improve their livelihood. I think a lot of people out here want people to depend on the system with welfare and food stamps. In WIC and all of that. Don't get me twisted. There's nothing wrong with food stamps I do think there's something wrong with welfare. When you get money every month from the government, you can go work. You can go work. You know what I mean? Let me say that. But food stamps come in handy. You know what I mean? Uh, food stamps keep a lot of people from being hungry. WIC does the same thing. Those programs I agree with. The welfare I don't agree with. But $7.25, that's not a living wage. You couldn't even find a place to stay for $7.25 an hour. Because what, $290 if you do, that's barely $1,000 a month. By the time you pay your rent, the average rent here in Atlanta, average 2-bedroom in Atlanta is running you $2,000 now. You can't even afford to live there even with a roommate. You can't even afford to live there even if you have 4 roommates and feed yourself for the month. So I do think we need to look at this thing closely and create a living wage. What is a living wage? That's not for me to decide. I could tell you what I would like to see, but that's for your Congress and your senators and the House of Representatives, all those guys to get together and come up with something that for the American people. But we can see that they have failed the American people because it only went up $33 in 30 years. Like I say, my first job was $4.25, and the federal minimum wage still today is $7.25. So that's $3. That's 300 pennies in 30 years. If they raise more than that, remember the bill that Congress tried to push through the other month? Well, I think they wanted to give themselves a 30 or 40% raise, go from 174,000 a year to like 240 some thousand. They raises more than that. So why can't we raise that minimum wage on the federal level across the board? We do everything else on the federal level. Yes, I do think states should be in charge or leading the charge on that. And most of them are. Like I know a lot of companies, they starting out with 14, 15, 16. Even at that level is not a living wage. $15, $16 is not a living wage, man. You see the inflation of things in America. I'm saying a 2-bedroom apartment costing you anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 easily. You're talking about a house, man. It depends on the type of house you want. It's gonna be up there too. And even at $15 an hour, that's about $600 a week. That's about $2,400 a month. By the time they take out their taxes, you might be bringing home $1,700 that month depending on the state you're living in. Federal, state, FACA, Medicare taxes. So you can't afford to live on your own and barely afford to live with your wife on that. Or a spouse, your husband, your companion. Let me get it cleared up for somebody. Well, I don't have a wife. I don't have a husband. You know what I mean? Your partner. You can't afford to live with your partner on that type of money. Atlanta News, they did a survey. Not a survey. They did an exercise last year on the average of a 1-bedroom apartment, how much you need to make to live by yourself in Atlanta. And I think it done went up now, but back then, I think last year, beginning of last year, or the end of 2023, and they say you need to make $32 an hour. $32 an hour to be able to have an apartment by yourself. If you ain't making that, you need a roommate. And if you got kids, my goodness, help you on that. But I like how Bernie Sanders asked this guy about changing the minimum wage. And he had no shame in his game to pretty much saying, no, we can push it back down to the state. So what good is the federal government? Military and interstates, I guess? I'm just asking. I have no idea. You know, if you want to push it back down to the states and the states run it, man, so be it. I think let the states run it. But we should have some type of standard across the board so people can eat, man. There's too many homeless people out here. And there's really a lot of homeless vets out here and broke up vets and people mind playing tricks on them. It's a lot of things going on that we need to fix across the board. And a lot of people's ailments is finances. Finances cause a lot of problems. Finance can solve some things, but it can cause some things too. Back in the day, it used to be the number one cause for divorce, finances. When the money funny, ain't no honey. I'm just being honest with you. So I think you should hit your congressperson up, hit your state's representatives up, and see if they can get this thing passed or changed, man. We get everything else pushed through. We send money out of the country with ease. Why can't we keep food on people's tables with ease and pay my fellow Americans a living wage? And with that said, I'm Abrew Yashar'el, man. Peace and shalom.